It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Hey there, Keith. Keith Peterson just gave a super chat. Thank you very much, my good friend. That was not needed, but much appreciated as usual. Hello to everybody. Welcome to the HVACR videos live stream. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. I am alive. I am breathing. So I take that as a plus. I think, I don't know. I woke up, so I guess that's a good thing. Haven't quite figured that out yet, but you know. As usual, I got a couple things I want to talk about, and then I want to get to you guys' questions, comments, different stuff. So if you guys have questions and comments, please put them in all capital or caps lock, essentially, right? All capital letters. It helps me to see the questions or things that you want me to cover. The reason why we do that is because there's a whole community and there's a whole conversation going on in the live chat. If you're watching this, it doesn't really matter to me what platform you watch this on. I think I stream on LinkedIn, a couple different Facebook locations. I think it streams on Twitter and YouTube. Yeah. And anyways, but it doesn't benefit me either way where you watch it. But I will say there's an entire community on the YouTube chat. So if you want to be a part of the community, you want to come over to the YouTube side, you'll see there's a bunch of people in there talking, and there's all kinds of conversations going on. So the reason why we say put it in all capital letters is because sometimes there's literally conversations going on in the chat that have nothing to do with the stream. And I'm fine with that. Like it's cool because the community, I go in other people's chats all the time on their live streams, and it's just a way to communicate with everybody and, you know, just be part of the community. So there's nothing wrong with having side conversations and side chats in there. Just do me a favor. If it's something that I need to address or you want to get my attention, put it in all capital letters. It'll just help me to see it. Sometimes I don't, though, because there's a lot going on in the chat. If I miss it, feel free to shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com, or just keep reposting it until myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop. So Let's get to, I want to cover something, but I'm going to answer a question really quick. So Hot Rod TV had asked in the chat if it is necessary to have a fan cycle control if the walk-in cooler system has a headmaster valve. Technically, it's a head pressure control valve. Headmaster is a brand name. I believe that was patented by Alco, which is now owned by Emerson, and their particular head pressure control valve was called a headmaster. I don't even know if Emerson makes a head pressure control valve anymore. They're now owned by Emerson. Actually, Emerson sold their refrigeration division to a different company, and it's technically owned by Copeland now. That's the new name of the company, new owners. I believe BlackRock's one of the owners, the big investment firm. But anyways, going off on a tangent as usual. So Hot Rod TV, your question, does a fan cycle control need to be on the system if you have a head pressure control valve? Not necessarily, but it depends on the situations and where the equipment is going to be located, what ambience it's going to be operating in. Typically, again, Keith Peterson, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That is really awesome. I really do appreciate it. So thank you, bud. He said HVAC gear is the lady's choice. Speaking of that, shameful plug. Go over to my website, hvacrvideos.com, if you want to get some merchandise. The HVACR videos hats, there's beanies. Actually, there's a few beanies. There should still be some beanies on there. Stickers, sweatshirts. The big thing about these hats, I put a lot of effort into them. Number one, they're not advertising my logo. They're advertising the HVACR acronym because I didn't want to conflict with uniform policies. And for the most part, that has successfully worked. I have several companies that have ordered multiple hats for their employees because it's just the HVACR acronym. The next really important feature is the black underbill. Put a lot of effort into that because there's nothing worse than coming home from work, throwing on your hat, and it's got a white underbill and you've been touching it all day and it's all dirty and nasty looking. I hate looking up at that. Last but not least, this hat is a breathable material. It's hard for you to see because I'm in front of a camera, but I can see light through this hat, but it is not a trucker hat, so you don't sweat as much with that hat on. So great way to help support the channel. Again, hvacrvideos.com. Keith, thank you very much for that super chat, pointing that out. It is much appreciated, my friend. So back to the question, do you need a head pressure control valve and a fan cycle control? It really depends on the design of the system and what you're doing with it, okay? If your system has hot gas defrost, there's a good possibility you would have a head pressure control valve and a fan cycle switch, because depending on where that compressor is located, we need all that discharge temperature that we can to help in our defrost. So we need to be driving that head pressure as high as possible, especially in the defrost situations. But let's step back a minute. What is the purpose of a head pressure control valve? Why is it even installed in the system? The head pressure control valve, in essence, drives up the head pressure in the system, so that way we maintain a higher head pressure. Here's the interesting thing. The higher the head pressure, the more energy inefficient the system is, in theory, okay? Because higher head pressure causes more energy to be consumed, and therefore that can drive up your energy costs, and that gets expensive. But the main reason for a head pressure control valve is simply for this valve right here. This is the thermostatic expansion valve. This happens to be a cutaway that I cut a valve apart and then reassembled it so you can see the internal workings of it. This expansion valve is a revolutionary device when it comes to metering devices. But this is a rather dumb valve. And what I mean by dumb is it is a mechanical thermostatic expansion valve. They work great, but they're not as efficient as an electronic expansion valve. With that being said, though, when installed correctly, when designed correctly, this valve is a lifesaver. It makes your system operate so much more efficiently as opposed to a fixed orifice metering device. This one can vary. But that also, because we have a thermostatic expansion valve that can open and close dependent on the bulb temperature, right? It can open the valve, close the valve. Okay, that means that we have to have extra refrigerant in the system at all times. See, on a fixed orifice metering device system, we just have the set refrigerant charge and it just runs that way all the time, but it might have some issues when it gets really hot outside, or it might have some issues when it gets really cold outside. That thermostatic expansion valve is there to make the system more efficient and make the refrigeration process more efficient, but it requires extra refrigerant to be stored in the liquid line receiver when it isn't needed, essentially, because it all of a sudden that valve can open at any second. It requires more refrigerant. That refrigerant stored in the liquid line receiver. But with that being said, that expansion valve is designed for a certain liquid temperature. The liquid temperature is dependent on the ambient temperature and the efficiency of the condenser. So therefore, if it's too cold outside, there's not enough heat content in the air, right? Then we have a hard time maintaining the proper head pressure in the system, okay? And it basically falls off the map. And that's where the head pressure control valve comes into play. The head pressure control valve is artificially going to simulate a higher ambient temperature day. It's going to drive the head pressure up in the system by flooding the condenser. So to get to your question, do you need a head pressure control valve and a fan cycle switch? Again, kind of like I said, it depends on the situation. Most situations are not going to call for it because something can happen depending on how the system was set up. With the fan cycle control and the head pressure control valve, they can actually conflict with each other and cause some issues in the system. Fan cycle switches tend to be more violent on the system. Hence, if you guys put a fan cycle switch on a system, put a set of gauges on it, and watch it operate, you're going to tend to notice some funny things that happen. Every time the condenser fan motor is shut off, look at your sight glass and look at your refrigerant pressures. The condenser fan motor is shut off, your sight glass is going to start to drain. It's going to go empty for a few minutes. Then you're going to see it starting to fill up, but then you're going to notice your head pressure's climbing. Then all of a sudden the fan cycle switch is going to turn the condenser fan motor on. When the head pressure gets up to a certain pressure, boom, the head pressure is going to drop and your sight glass is going to go crazy flashing. And then it's going to like have some issues. And then the condenser fan motor is going to shut off and turn on and shut off and turn on. And every time that's happening, your sight glass is flashing, it's draining, all kinds of weird stuff's happening. And it's very violent on the system. So fan cycling is not the most efficient way to do it. Oftentimes, fan cycling is not set up and installed correctly. In a perfect world, if you have a system that has two condenser fan motors, you have a separate fan cycle switch for each condenser fan motor, and you don't want them turning on and off at the same time. That way you can have a more even head pressure in the system. So it's not just on, off, on, off. It's one fan motor off, and then maybe one fan motor turning on and off, right? So that way it can maintain a little bit better. But you will typically see fan cycling and head pressure control in ice machines or systems that have hot gas defrost. Now, not all ice machines have hot gas defrost. A good majority of them do, but not all of them. But it is very critical that we have that high discharge temperature when we need hot gas defrost and or even cool vapor defrost, which Manitowoc happens to use on their Quiet Cube machines. They use cool vapor defrost. What it actually does is it draws liquid vapor off the top of the receiver. It's cool. It's not cold. It's not hot. It's cool. And then it feeds the evaporator, and it's supposed to be a little bit less, damaging on the system when you do cool vapor defrost. But, I don't know if it's necessarily any better than hot gas defrost. It is what it is. Okay. So it really depends on the situation. Now, we have some new stuff happening in the industry that people are losing their minds over, because if you go buy a new refrigeration condensing unit from insert name of refrigeration manufacturer that uses head pressure control valves, you're going to tend to notice that lately a good majority of the manufacturers have different head pressure control valves. On the side of them, they usually have a stamp. This one right here says LAC 4240. So this is a 240 PSI bypass. So when the system pressure gets below 240 PSI on the high side, this valve is going to artificially bypass, start flooding the condenser, shut off the flow, and it's basically going to happen at 240 PSI. On the older systems, this is from an ice machine. That's why it's so high. On the older systems, it was pretty common that we would see 180 PSI, then the head pressure control valve would start to flood the condenser. Okay, but we're starting to see that number go lower and lower, sometimes as low as 100 PSI, 120 PSI, and everybody's freaking out saying these new head pressure control valves that insert name of manufacturer, Heatcraft, Russell, whatever, is putting on their condensing units is nothing but junk. People are saying that the manufacturers are messing with everybody. That's not the case. There are some new energy efficiency requirements in the industry that were rolled out a few years ago called AWEF requirements, annual walk-in efficiency factor. And it's essentially a government mandate to save energy, okay? So the government doesn't necessarily go to each manufacturer and say, every head pressure control valve you put on a system has to be 100 PSI bypass. You need to float the head pressure down. You need to do this. The government isn't doing that. The government just goes to the manufacturers and said, your efficiency on your equipment needs to be at this level. However you get to that point, so be it, just as long as your equipment's to this level. So some manufacturers are floating the head pressure down by using, head pressure control valves that bypass at 100 psi, 120 psi. Some manufacturers are doing fan cycling. Some are installing electronic expansion valves, microchannel condensers. They're all doing something to try to save energy, but they are all allowed to go about it a different way. With that being said, as a technician that is installing new equipment, we need to understand that there is new design criteria for when we are installing expansion valves on systems or sizing expansion valves for systems that have AWEF compliant equipment, okay? So these manufacturers, for the most part, you need to lean on each manufacturer and see what kind of energy efficiency requirements they are implementing into their equipment, or energy efficiency standards, or whatever you want to call it, right? Strategies, I guess, is a good way to put it. And that goes into the design criteria. So you no longer size an expansion valve the old school way. You need to assume the lowest operating ambient temperature. That may have changed now because we installed a different head pressure control valve on the system. We're no longer maintaining necessarily a 90-degree condensing temp. We might be dropping that temperature down. And that's what we mean by floating the head pressure down. We are slowly reducing the head pressure that we are maintaining in that system, even in the low ambient conditions. Now, a lot of people are really frustrated and getting angry because, oh my gosh, this is becoming a problem. We're having an issue with, this head pressure control valve is causing my expansion valve not to work. Before you start blaming the valve and the manufacturer, you need to look at the design of your equipment. You need to make sure that the expansion valve is designed to operate in the conditions at which it is now, because we just changed the operating envelope of that compressor in that system by reducing the head pressure and putting a lower bypass pressure head pressure control valve on there. Right? So we just changed the operating envelope, and it's not just a rule of thumb anymore. We can't just necessarily go in there and design 100-degree ambient, 90-degree ambient for our expansion valves. We need to look at the lowest ambient temperature, and then we need to look at the highest ambient temperature, and we need to look at the performance of our equipment, evaporator, condenser, and we need to see the operating envelope, and then we need to size our expansion valve based on that criteria. Another thing that a lot of people are getting wrong is if you use off-the-shelf equipment just from a supply house that wasn't necessarily designed for the low ambient conditions that you're in, you might run into problems. It's not as cookie cutter anymore because of efficiency standards and regulations by the government, not the manufacturers, okay? You need to design your equipment appropriately. So you might need to put receiver heaters on your system. You might need to do this or do that. So you can't just necessarily buy off-the-shelf equipment from a supply house and assume it's going to work because they sold it to you, because they don't know where that equipment's going to be used. And supply houses don't always necessarily give you what should be used or what's up to code in your area. That's our job as technicians and business owners and equipment designers to do. So hopefully I answered your question, went off on a tangent as usual. Let's see what we got going on in the chat right now. Have I seen Sporlan expansion valves on supermarket applications, since you've seen very few of them on a reach-in in rack? No, I don't do any supermarket work, so I couldn't tell you. But yes, Sporlan expansion valves are very common in the supermarket systems. I know that much. So reading through the chat, who listens to the government? That's exactly right. All right, let me see what else we got going on in the chat right now. Let's see, reading through here. Okay, I'm just seeing if I'm missing anything, and then I'll get to some of the questions that we have. Can I explain how the 4 EXVs work on a 2024 IntelliPack? Spencer, that would not be my thing to help you with, but there's plenty of people in the chat right now that can surely help you with that, so they may or may not be able to do that. So pay attention to the chat, and if someone's nice enough, maybe they can share an email with you or something and get you some information for that, okay? All right, cool. So let's get to a couple things, and then I'm going to get to a few questions or a few things that I want to talk about. So life has been crazy for me lately, okay? I'm sure you've noticed that my videos haven't been as consistent. Live streams haven't been as consistent. Work has been hectic. I'm down a technician. Unfortunately, we had to let someone go not too long ago. And I it was a bummer that we had to do that, but now we were already short staffed. Now we're even more short staffed. So currently right now, I am on call for 5 weeks in a row, and then I get 1 week off. So it's a bit rough right now. Okay. But, I kind of wanted to bring this up, not so much to complain, not for pity, but I wanted to bring this up because this industry can be tough. And we go through it in this industry. There's constantly something. There's always something going on, some new challenge that we have, some new stress that we have. As a business owner, there's all sorts of stress involved in my life, but there's a lot of good things in my life too. Okay. So first and foremost, before people start reaching out, even though I'm stressed, even though I'm going through a lot right now, I'm okay. Okay. I have a good support system. I have a good friend group. And my wife and I have really good communication, and I communicate with everybody. So while I'm overwhelmed, while I'm stressed out, I am communicating with my friends and my family. They know that I'm stressed. They know that I'm going through a lot. And it's important, in my opinion, to communicate that stuff. When you're going through stuff, make sure you got someone to talk to. Okay. Reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, reach out to help, whatever you need to. Don't go through this alone. Okay. I have a good support staff. I'm very thankful for that. It doesn't make my life, any better. It's just nice knowing that I have a support staff checking in on me to make sure that I'm okay. Right. And I am. Right. But it's so very important. I can't stress that enough. Reach out to people, lean on friends, lean on family. Let them know that you're struggling with things. Don't try to go through things alone, because I know how frustrating and confusing and dark it can get if you just get stuck in your own head and don't communicate with people. I've done it in the past. It's not a good place to be. So I highly encourage everybody out there, make sure you have a support group, someone to lean on, a friend, a family member, whatever you got to do. Communicate with people. Don't go through the craziness and the chaos alone. Okay. It's very important. All right. Let's go through a few more things, and okay, cool. So I got a couple things I want to cover, and then we'll kind of get to some other things. So remember, put your questions and comments in all capital letters if you have them for me, and I'll try to get to them when I can. So I had a recent video. I called it Indoor Blower Madness. And the question that someone had was, if the factory had installed a liquid line filter dryer before the fixed orifice header on the carrier package unit, would that have helped to prevent the fixed orifice metering devices from being restricted? And yes and no. Okay, because you can put a filter dryer on a system all you want, but if that filter dryer plugs up, then that system is going to starve and it's going to suffer. If the system is running with a dirty condenser on a regular basis, in theory, the liquid line filter dryer is slowly going to plug up, and then that's going to lead to a high superheat situation where the compressor is starving for refrigerant vapor that helps to cool that compressor off coming back. In the summertime, you're definitely going to run into some overheat issues, thermal overload, and potentially a bad compressor. Okay. So would putting a filter dryer before the liquid header, as opposed to right after the condenser, like on that carrier unit, have solved all of our problems? No, not necessarily, because the customer wasn't doing routine maintenance. So that's a very important thing to understand. Okay. Reading through the chat. Okay. I'm going to grab something real quick. All right, let's talk about something real quick. So Carrier has something called, Train calls it an Accutrol metering device. I don't know what Carrier actually calls it, but it's a metering device. So this is a liquid header on a Carrier package unit. Now, if you look closely, you're going to see some little dimples right here. There's a dimple here and there's a dimple here. You can kind of see them. Each one of those dimples is actually going to be a metering device, okay? There's 2 metering devices in each one of these lines coming out of there. If you look right there, you can see one of the metering devices that I cut off. That's one. That tiny little orifice is the metering device on that unit. You can't really see it, but inside there is another one. But what I have is a perfect cutaway right here where I can show you guys. So this right here goes like this, and this is one of those cutaways. And if we look right here, you're actually going to see there's a double orifice right there. Every one of those lines is going to have a metering device in it. See, this is the other side of it. So this is a double orifice. There's one right there, and then there's another one right after it. So think about that double orifice when you say you can clear those metering devices by blowing through them with nitrogen, okay? That is the opening of one of the metering devices. That's really hard to see inside of there. It is very difficult to clear those. Now, I realize that some people have had luck by heating them up, spraying nitrogen through the system, and hoping that it clears. But think about it. If there is a true contaminant in there, how are you going to get it through each one of those tiny little orifice-style metering devices that you see right inside there, that tiny little hole? It's going to be very difficult to get pressure to push contaminants through two of these that are one after the other. Double orifice right inside here. Very, very difficult to clear. In that situation, majority of the time, the easiest way is to just replace the evaporator. You can change the liquid header. That is a disaster in itself. A lot of cutting, a lot of brazing, or you can just pull the top on the unit, change the whole evaporator, and move on. Let me put this back real quick. All right. And, so when customers don't do routine maintenance, bad stuff happens to their system, and a lot of it's really hard to prevent. Okay. So moving a filter dryer on that carrier unit from the outlet of the condenser 3 feet over to the inlet of the liquid header on the evaporator, is that really going to make a huge difference? Not necessarily. The contaminants are still flowing through the system. So, and if it does, if you put like a HH dryer that has a finer, it can catch finer particles in the system essentially, right? Because it's designed to catch the wax buildup from a burnout. An HH core is in theory going to plug up faster or catch the contaminants faster, but it's also going to plug up and cause a bunch of issues too. So those are all things that you need to think about. Let's see if I'm missing anything in the chat right now. Okay, community service, got it. Apparently, reading through the chat. Okay, cool. No, I'm being a good guy now. Okay, cool. Right on. All right. Couple more things. So had a video a couple weeks back that I was working on some exhaust fans and I had to change some exhaust fans. One question I got from quite a few people is why, in their opinion was that I should have moved the hinges on that exhaust fan to the other side so it hinged the other way instead of hinging towards the grease trap. The manufacturer pre-installed those hinges. We just had to install the bottom part of it. So we just left them on the way the manufacturer installed them. But in reality, I prefer the exhaust fans hinging towards the grease trap. So that way, when you lift it up, grease doesn't pool inside the fan and it actually drains out into the drain itself. I just like them that way, but to each their own if someone wants to do it differently. Jason Cadet wants to know if I have a cutaway of a liquid line filter dryer. Sure thing. I got cutaways for days over here, my good friend. Okay, so this is the cutaway of a Sporlan Catch-All 030 or 052 filter dryer, okay? You can see there's going to be a mesh screen, right? You can see the flow. So notice that they're going to have the mesh screen on the outlet of the dryer to allow the dryer to catch the most contaminants, as it's filling up. Now, we can also grab this guy right here that I cut away, right? You can see that mesh screen right there, okay? And this one happens to be, I think this is an HH dryer. I don't know which one that is, okay? And then you can see this is the solid core desiccant right here. This is what absorbs the moisture in the system and the contaminants, right? And the refrigerant flows through that guy. But you can see this is what a filter dryer looks like when you cut it open, okay? So I have this cutaway right here, where it's the sideways cutaway, and then you got plexiglass over it. And then I got this one right here. Hey, guess what? These things aren't difficult to make. You get a bandsaw and a jig for your bandsaw, you can start cutting components open for days. I got head pressure control valve right here that I cut open. I got liquid line expansion valve. Now, I'm not going to say it's like the easiest thing to make a perfect cutaway on these things. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of time, but you could do it. Anybody can do it, really. Let me put these back. All right, let's see what else we got going on in here. Have I seen the new walk-in equipment already beat up from a customer? Yeah, customers beat their new stuff up, come all the time. Freon Leon wants to know if I have training videos. Keith Peterson, again, thanks so much for that super chat. You're being awesome, man. And then Freon wants to know if I have training videos coming from my office. I mean, I would love to say yes someday. Life has been hectic and it's been hard to even get these videos done. So yeah, I got all kinds of sorts of ideas and stuff. I want to work on more things. So let's hope I can do it some more. Let's see. What are my thoughts on using outdated hand signals versus a cell phone or walkie-talkies to talk to the crane operator? So instead of doing hand signals like boom up, boom down, hold the load, boom up, hold the load, travel left, travel right, travel that way. What do you want to do? Boom out. You know, like why use hand signals versus using a walkie-talkie or a cell phone? Okay, so a lot of people ask me this question on a regular basis. Why in the heck am I using outdated hand signals? Oftentimes, and I'm not against using a walkie-talkie or Bluetooth, but I oftentimes will ask the crane operators what they prefer. If they want me to do hand signals, then we do. I will say that there's going to be an issue if I'm going to use a radio, two-way radio, walkie-talkie, or a cell phone. And that is that a good majority of the time, while I am directing the crane, I am also communicating with people on the roof. And if we were to have a dedicated signal person that is on the phone with the crane operator, there needs to be nothing but crane commands coming from that person to the crane operator. We can't have the person that is signaling on the roof talking to other people across the roof like I do on a regular basis, because then the crane operator potentially would do something that I don't necessarily want him to do, because he might mistake something that I'm telling someone else on the roof for a command for the crane. So because I'm such a small company and we have such a small crew, it is a little difficult for me to use two-way radios, or it would have to be a cell phone, because two-way radios can be dangerous. If you drop the two-way radio, like, you got to keep communicating. The other thing to think about is that the person that is going to be the signal person that would be relaying a phone conversation with the crane operator has to be trained in that kind of stuff, and they have to think in the perspective of the crane operator. Whatever direction the crane operator is sitting, when I give them commands and say boom left, it needs to be the crane operator's left, not my left. Boom down, boom up, boom, all this different stuff. It needs to be crane operator directed, essentially, right? So you need to think about it. You can't just give anybody a Bluetooth phone and say, talk to the crane operator, tell them what to do. They really need to think this through, and they need to think from the perspective of the crane operator, because the crane operator needs to understand, like, hey, when I say boom right, boom right, boom right, stop, you know, or that needs to be from the position that the crane operator is sitting in the crane. Okay, so it's really important to remember that, and those are all things that factor into this. So for me, the basic hand signals, they're the best, because then if I communicate with someone and I tell them hoist up or hoist down, right? He doesn't hear what I'm saying as I'm talking to my text. Is that good? Is that good? Do you want me to stop him? Stop, you know, like, and he's not getting confused by the conversation that I'm having with technicians on the roof too. Okay. The bigger the company, the easier it is to have a dedicated signal person. But for me, I'm wearing many hats and I'm communicating while I'm signaling and doing all this different stuff. Okay. Let me see what else we got going on. Reading through the chat. What am I missing? Shop tour video in the future. There's not really much to see with my shop. So am I continuing the Apprentice series? When I get a chance, yeah, I'll do another one. So Mike B says, can't go wrong with hand signals. Let me see. Let's see. What's the worst horror story of all of Chris's video? All of Chris's videos are training videos, says Tom. Well, thank you very much. HVACR videos, any compressor cutouts? I mean, look at that one sitting right there, my good friend, or that one sitting right there. Those are compressor cutaways that I pulled apart, scroll compressors. You know, if I did a better job, I would probably categorize my videos a little bit better, where I have a series of just videos where I cut up compressors, but instead they're just in other videos. Something that you have to understand is I would love for my platform and my channel to grow into something bigger. It's just a matter of finding the time. I'm also running a refrigeration and air conditioning business. So as for instance, today, my day spent having 5 interviews at the office, because we're currently interviewing for an apprentice/service tech position right now. So we had 5 interviews today. So that's what I did today. And then tomorrow I'm going to go run service calls. Wednesday, I'm installing 2 makeup air units with the crane, you know, and so forth. So we've always got something going on. And, you know, these videos, while I love them, and I do eventually want to figure out how to do teaching more and more tutorials and spend more time on these videos right now, I have to keep my refrigeration business running too, because the refrigeration business is where I get the content for the videos. And so it's a constant struggle. In a perfect world, I have people help me with my videos and stuff, and that might come in the future, but right now it's a little difficult to do that. Hey, by the way, happy St. Patty's Day to all that celebrate it. So got myself a nice Guinness here. Been sitting on my desk for about 35, 40 minutes. It's like the ideal 50-degree temperature. Man, when you drink like a dark ale like this, hazelnut, nut brown, any kind of a brown ale, a Guinness, you got to let them come to at least 50 degrees, okay? The temperature, the flavor explodes when it hits like 50 degrees, and it's so much better than just an ice cold Guinness, because an ice cold Guinness just tastes like anything else. This is nice. I don't really drink it warm per se, but I like it 50, 55 degrees, somewhere in there, maybe even 60. It's got a nice, good flavor profile to it. All right. Let's see what else we got going on in here. Reading through the chat right now. Again, if I'm missing stuff, guys, there's so much going on. Repeat it or whatever. I'll try to get to it. So, let's see. Yeah, I don't know. Is it a stout? Is it a Guinness stout? I don't know. Whatever, dude. It's Guinness. So, whatever it is. Okay. Reading through here. What am I missing? Okay. Some of the funniest conversations were between a crane operator and a relay guy. You could tell they know each other way too good. Oh yeah, that's, sometimes that could be fun. You know what I would really love to do is I probably shouldn't say this, but because someone else is going to go do it and beat me to it, but I'd love to do a crane series where, like there's lots of things that I want to do with this channel. And I've talked to operators that do training classes and stuff. And it's like, man, it'd be cool to do like a basic tutorial from a crane operator, with hand signals and rigging the load and how to properly signal and all those different stuff. Like that'd be a fun series to do. So maybe someday, and please don't steal my ideas and rain on my parade, but that's, if you have ideas on how to make that happen. If you guys ever have ideas on cool videos or ways to get me in touch with the people that can help with cool videos and stuff, feel free to reach out, shoot me an email. Maybe we could set something up. So, all right, let me get to a couple more things on my list here and see what else we got. So, okay. So, in the exhaust fan video, the first thing I did was I had 2 functioning exhaust fans and I was replacing them with like for like fans, meaning that the fans had the exact wheel sizes, the pulley sizes were the same. But before I changed the exhaust fans, I had 2 functioning exhaust fans. I measured the RPMs of the driven pulley. Okay. That is the shaft that is going directly to the blower wheel with a tachometer. I measured how fast it was spinning. And why in the heck did I do that? Okay. The reason why I did that was because, yes, I was installing like for like fans, but I wanted to make sure, just to be sure, 100%, that I set the pulleys to the right setting. They were adjustable motor pulleys on it. And the motor pulley is going to change the speed that the exhaust fan is driven. So the driven pulley is going to be driven by the motor pulley, right? And if you open and close the motor pulley, that is going to speed up and slow down how fast the belt is turning the driven pulley. So I can measure that with a tachometer like I did. And then I matched the new fans. It actually already came from the factory, less than 100 RPMs it was within 100 RPMs. Like it was just under, it was like 50 RPMs or something like that. It wasn't even enough for me to start adjusting the pulleys. I was like, dude, that's fine. I got it close enough within spec. And then from that point forward, I told the customer, if you really want to get a test and balance company in here, they can fine tune this and get this all perfectly set. But I set it up as close to factory specs as I could and left that in the customer's hands. Okay. Because it's all about delivering the best value with the tools that we have. So that's why I measured the RPMs, was because I wanted to make sure that I got the new exhaust fans running as close to the original operating speed of the old exhaust fans for the air balance reasons, if that makes sense to everybody in the chat. All right, reading through here. Yep, what else do we got? Easiest way to get into the industry, don't overthink it. Don't know what you mean by that. Don't know. Oh, I think you're talking to someone else. As someone who has been watching for a few years now, what advice could you give to someone who is looking to get into the industry? Oh, Michael Ross is asking that. And then Performance HVACR is saying, apply for a job somewhere. That truly is. All you got to do is go knock on someone's door and apply for a job. Call them. You don't necessarily have to knock on their door, but call them, email them, ask them for an opportunity. So currently right now, I'm looking for apprentices, right? I'm preferably have an apprentice that's at least finished a some sort of an HVACR program that gave them some fundamentals of which I can build on. So I am currently looking for an inexperienced technician that has some sort of schooling that I can then put through an apprenticeship and hopefully mold it into a full-fledged service technician. So there's companies out there all looking to hire people. I would love to hire an experienced technician too. If anybody out there knows of an experienced technician in the Southern California area, specifically near the Inland Empire, Jurupa Valley, California, Riverside, California, that is looking for a position, if they're experienced, pass them my information. Let them know that I am looking for someone, but I'm also looking for an apprentice. So I'm always looking to hire. I need some help for sure, to say the least. So if I install parts on something that's getting replaced in a few weeks to a month or two, would I ever save those parts? I'm not a huge fan of taking used parts off of equipment, but I mean, if it's brand new, yeah, there's a possibility I might save it for a rainy day, just for an emergency situation. We certainly learned that through the pandemic when we were having a lot of supply shortages and it was really difficult to get stuff. Circuit boards, some of the silliest things. Yeah, if we were disposing of an inoperating piece of equipment or operating piece that just needed to be replaced, sometimes we would harvest certain parts off of it for a rainy day just to get us through a bind, especially when we had the supply shortage. But we're kind of coming out of that. Things are kind of getting worked out. I don't necessarily save a lot of old stuff anymore, but every once in a while you come across something and you're like, that's a hard part to get and that one's still functioning. I'll pull it off and put it on the shelf for an emergency situation. Now, I typically don't sell used parts to a customer, but I might take a used part, put it on there to get me by until I can get the factory part or the proper one ordered and installed. So sometimes we do for. All right, cool. My buddy Will Speed in here says that his company is looking for a building automation service tech. Yeah, I mean, everybody's looking for someone right now. This industry is very hungry for technicians nationwide, from coast to coast, from top to bottom. We need technicians in this industry. So, definitely reach out to people. BAS equals badass senior, says Mike B. Yeah, that could be. Please tell the tech that solenoid valves are not sized by the line size, but refrigerant and tonnage. So tired of being on the counter, having to explain this to techs, and they try to fight me. And that is 100% correct. It's about the rack. Is making a great point. So he's implying that he's a counter technician, and technicians always want to come in and ask him for a 3/8 liquid line solenoid valve. That's not how you size a solenoid valve. You need to take a lot of factors into consideration. If you're installing a Sporlan solenoid valve, Sporlan does a decent job. They do a good job of having tech documents that you can look at. You can go to their virtual engineer on their website. It'll help you to size stuff, but they even have it printed on the side of the box, the basic tonnage that this valve can operate within. You want to be very careful about improperly sizing liquid line solenoid valves because it can lead to bad things. Okay. Valves can get stuck open. It can be a very, very difficult issue to diagnose to. So be careful, but you do not size a solenoid valve simply by the line sizes. And also, furthermore, it is not completely unheard of to have a liquid line solenoid valve that has a smaller line size than the liquid line itself, to have to use bushings or fitting reducers to reduce it down from 1/2 inch to 3/8. Doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing just for the solenoid valve, as long as the port on the valve is sized appropriately for the correct tonnage or horsepower of the equipment, a tonnage essentially, okay? So also pay attention to a liquid line solenoid valve and where you have it installed in the system. Is it controlling one singular coil, or is it a solenoid valve that is feeding 2 coils? Because that needs to come into consideration when you are sizing that valve too. So it's very important. Same thing goes for refrigerant line sizes. You don't just necessarily follow the size that's coming out of the condensing unit just because it's 7/8 3/4 coming out of the Heatcraft condensing unit. Doesn't mean that that's the line size that goes all the way down to the evaporator. That line size could change multiple times in the process of making it down to the evaporator, because you might have a suction riser You know, you might have different things happening for oil return. So line sizes are not sized simply by what the equipment dictates. You have to look at the installation instructions, look at, again, you can lean on Sporland's Virtual Engineer. You can go into the old Copeland manuals. You can read tech installation manuals for Heatcraft equipment, Russell equipment, whatever brand you're using. And oftentimes they will have line sizing charts. Okay. So keep that in mind and try to follow proper piping practices. Okay. But same thing with liquid line solenoid valves. Yeah. Just like, you had just said, it's not just based on the line size. Okay. You don't size a solenoid valve just because it's a 3/8 solenoid valve. There's different port sizes on each one of those valves. Okay. So reading through the chat, as a new tech right out of school, you would be an awesome boss to work for, is what he's saying to me. You're up here in Seattle, recent 66 member, now working to get your new branch of cooling tower refurb service company started. Well, good for you, my friend. Yeah, you know, I try to be a decent human being, but I'm a flawed individual. So I'm not the perfect best boss that you may think I am, but I try my best. So it's a constant battle with myself to not let my crazy tendencies that my head tends to obsess about get in the way of work. Just because refrigeration lines in my head need to be the perfect straightness, the perfect bends directly where they need to be, you know, I have to remember to tone it down because, you know, just because a tech, you know, bent a refrigerant line a 1/4 inch longer and it has to do a little whoopty before it goes down. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's functional and it works. So I have to convince myself all the time, hey, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be functionally perfect. Okay. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. What am I missing? Oh, that's so interesting, Alex T. So he says, they watched my videos on electric defrost at trade school today. That's really cool. I hope that your trade school is using my videos as a supplement and not as a replacement. And I will say that I know during the pandemic, there was a lot of trade schools that were using videos as their class as opposed to a supplement. Okay. So I hope that your school has fundamentals and lectures and stuff, and then maybe occasionally you watch a video as like to reinforce some concept that your teacher's been working on. I hope that's the case, and I'm pretty sure it is the case in your situation. But yeah, but that's good. I'm glad that you guys enjoy the videos and they serve a purpose. That's really cool. Okay, so reading through the chat right now. What else do we got? Right on, Edward. Edward says he got the same mindset from me. That's how he is 24/7. That's really awesome, dude. I wish you lived closer to me, Edward, because I'd bring you on, but you know, we've talked already. You're just a little bit out of my service area. So, all right, cool. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple more things on my list here. Oh, great question. So a couple weeks ago, I had a video that a walk-in cooler had a leaking solenoid valve on top of the box. And a lot of people asked me, number one of the more common questions was why, because I had to go up into the attic to braze in a new solenoid valve. So why didn't I reinstall or relocate that liquid line solenoid valve down at the evaporator coils inside the box? Okay, first and foremost, the reason why I didn't do that, because it would have been a lot of piping work. Okay, the coils were piped that way, and the solenoid valve was installed on top of the walk-in because it was the most convenient place for the type of piping arrangement that they did to those boxes. So the refrigerant lines drop down about 18 inches before each coil, 90 in the coils, and then go directly into the expansion valves because the liquid line solenoid valve and the T where the liquid line tees off to both coils was up on top of the box. If I relocated it down into the box, it would have taken me piping from one coil to the other, dropping the liquid line down through, running it, then teeing it off to both coils. It just would have been a bunch more piping. So yeah, it was a little inconvenient to get up on top of the box and deal with that solenoid valve, but that's the first time in 20 years that that solenoid valve's been replaced. I mean, I went ahead and downsized it because it was a little oversized and put the right size valve in there. In theory, we really shouldn't have to work up there for a very long time. So it's not the most practical place to put it, but it's up there. So I'm not going to reinvent the wheel trying to change it. Next question on that video was, why didn't I just rebuild that solenoid valve? Instead, I replaced the whole valve. Couple reasons why. Number one, if you paid attention in the video, I actually downsized the valve to a smaller valve because it was massively oversized. Okay, so I went ahead and downsized it to the more appropriate size for the tonnage of refrigeration that's flowing through that valve. The next thing is that I did find a Sporlan rebuild kit over at the United Refrigeration in Ontario, California that day. I happened to be out a ways away from Ontario, and there was really bad traffic, and it took me an hour to get to the closest supply house. The Ontario one would have been another 45 minutes away from where I was located. So in practicality, it was going to be easier and faster for me to just pump the system down and change the whole valve. So I did. Okay. Instead of trying to rebuild it, I was able to downsize it to the right size, put in the right valve, and call it a day. So, all right. Let me see, read through here. Okay, let me read through the chat and see what I'm missing here. Hopefully the weather's pretty decent. I know that we just had some really bad weather roll through the Midwest. I know Missouri got clobbered with tornadoes, specifically the Rolla area in Jefferson County, or actually Phelps County. I think Jefferson County got hit too. Ironically, I was actually born in Rolla, Missouri. Now, I don't have any family there anymore, but I know that a lot of the Sporlan people, of which I need to reach out to them, have family and or are familiar with that area. So I hope that everybody from Sporlan and everybody in that area was safe. And, you know, unfortunately, there was some loss of life, you know, and it's a bummer. Those tornadoes that went through there really ravaged that area. And they didn't just hit Missouri. They hit a bunch of other places too. And that storm was no joke. So I hope that everybody's okay. I hope that you and your families are safe. And in this inclement weather, I hope that, you know, just everything worked out for y'all. So let's see what else we got going on in the chat. Rick's solenoid rebuild was epic. Haven't seen Rick's new video with the solenoid rebuild yet. So, okay, reading through here. Rick and I will kind of go back and forth because, you know, we both struggle with making videos. Rick and I are good friends. So we both struggle with making videos, and then he'll call me and be like, "Do you watch my video?" And I'm like, "No." "Did you watch my video?" He's like, "No." And I'm like, "Yeah, exactly. So don't even give me crap." You know, we kind of go back and forth, but Rick's a cool dude. So he really is. He's a good friend to have. So I was fortunate enough that he brought his wife with him to Florida, and I brought my wife. So we got to sit down and have dinner one evening, and it was kind of nice. Same thing with Jason Johnson, and got to meet up with a bunch of other people, and it was really nice. Got to see some amazing people at the AHR Expo and the HVACR Training Symposium. Were both great events. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat right now. What am I missing? Okay, that's not a question for me. Why is my logo sideways on the wall? Logo sideways on the wall. What do you mean? I don't know what you mean by my logo being sideways on the wall. Do you mean the snowflake behind me? Or what logo are you talking about? I don't see it. Am I missing it? Question mark. I don't know what you mean by sideways. What are you talking about? I'm confused. I'm assuming you'll put it in the chat here in just a minute. So behind me, you talking about my snowflake? My snowflake, is that sideways? I don't know if that's sideways. Is it supposed to be the other direction? I just put it up there. I didn't really pay attention. Oh, it's crooked? Okay. Yeah, I just didn't pay attention to it. Career advice, new tech, 6 months out of trade school, given the keys to a van after 1 week of training, afraid of developing bad habits versus the necessity of figuring things out on your own. Speedy, I personally, now to each their own, everybody does it differently. I am not a fan of throwing people to the wolves. I'm a fan of a proper apprenticeship, or at least an attempt at a proper apprenticeship. Yeah, 6 months out of trade school, given the keys to a van after 1 week of training, not really my favorite thing to do. I'm not saying you can't survive, but I'm saying that's not my favorite thing to do. My apprenticeship just had 5 interviews today, so I explained it 5 times today. Starts as technician comes to work for me. For about 90 days, they're on a probationary period. After that, they become a full-fledged technician or employee of the company, and then starts the ride-along period where they're going to ride with me for at least a couple weeks, and then I will get them into a van, but then they will shadow me. So when I mean, they're still going to be with me on every single call. They're still going to shadow me, but they're going to drive their own van, and they're going to show up to the job site. and they're going to shadow. And that's typically going to last 3 months to a year, usually closer to a year, where we're going to slowly start letting them get out there on their own. There's going to come a period when we're going to give them a head start of a couple hours to a service call, let them go out, get their hands on it, play with it, calculated depending on the service call and the severity of the issues, right? Of course, if it's a walk-in freezer and it's an emergency, I'm going to go out there right away. But if it's ones that I can send them to get their hands dirty, start poking and prodding at things before I get there, once I'm confident in their abilities, then I'm going to start doing that and letting them dive into things in a controlled environment where I'm still there to make sure that they're capable and have the support that they need. Then once we get through that, then they're going to start going on service calls. I'll start letting them do service calls on their own. And then slowly as things go on, I'll start giving them more complicated tasks and, and then work their way into it. I'm not a fan of just throwing someone out there and saying, figure it out. That's just not my thing. So I don't want to say that it's bad what they're doing to you, but if you're not the right person that can handle it, it can be bad because it can burn you out and be an issue for you advancing in your career to be thrown to the wolves like that. So be cautious about that. Jason Johnson wants to know if he can be my apprentice. Only if I can be your apprentice, Jason, because you can educate me in so many different ways. Imagine if all of us friends started a service company together and then we all just fed off of each other. Why would that be epic? It would totally fail. It would never work. But imagine that. Adam Muffich and I from the Overtime Show and Bill Russell and Joe, who's in the chat right now, we've all talked man, it would be freaking epic if we could all work together. That would be freaking awesome. We could buy a compound and then each of us build a house for our family on the compound. And then we all live on the compound and then we could start a cult. And then just be weird, we could share our money and be weird like that. No, I'm just kidding. But on a side note, if you guys aren't familiar with the HVAC Overtime Show, it's a show that I do with my friends, typically every other Friday. We're currently doing every other Friday, is the plan. And it's just a nice hangout with my friends. So I've told this story many times, but the very first HVACR training symposium that I went to at the Kalos headquarters in Claremont, Florida, that Brian Orr put on, I was at the event and I was doing a speaking engagement. So when I got off stage, I walked down and there was a few people there to meet me, right? So I was shaking hands with people, just talking to them. And this gentleman walks up to me and he goes, "Hey, you're from California, right?" And I said, yeah. And he goes, "Are you anywhere near Vista, California?" And I said, I have some customers and I used to have a customer in that area. And I go, "I'm familiar with Vista. I'm about an hour and a half away." And he goes, "There's a restaurant there. I think you really should try it. It's called the Yellow Deli Restaurant." Oh, okay, cool. He hands me a pamphlet. I didn't think much of it, went about my day. Well, when I went back to the hotel room that night, my wife and my family were there and I was going through the bag of stuff that I had and I was reading through this pamphlet that the guy handed me because I just found it and I forgot about it and I'm reading through it and I go, "Oh my gosh." And my wife goes, "What?" And I go, "This is the best thing ever." She goes, "What?" And I go, "I just got invited to a cult." And she goes, "What do you mean?" The pamphlet that he handed me was for the Yellow Deli Restaurant, but they are a legitimate religious organization, but they're a cult. Okay. So just Google the Yellow Deli cult yourself, go down that rabbit hole after the stream's over. And I was so proud that I was invited to this restaurant and this guy watched my videos and I was like, dude, he invited me to come to his cult and check it out. They share their money and work in the restaurant. And I think they have other jobs too. It's very interesting, very intriguing. I'm not going to join a cult, but it was still hilarious to be invited to that. Some of the cool things that have happened, but that's one of my proudest moments when I got invited to a cult. That was really cool. Let me see what else we got going on in the chat. Al Anonymous wants to join too. We want to have a giant super tech. I'm sorry, but freaking NorCal Dave is definitely going to be part of our super tech freaking compound for sure, dude. This is going to be weird. This is going to get crazy nuts. We're going to be just a bunch of weird HVAC guys for sure, dude. So we're going to invite all of our friends. How long have I been part of a cult now? Not very long at all. Actually, my wife still forbids me to go to that restaurant, but my oldest daughter just turned 18 and she's all intrigued and wants to go check it out. So I think my daughter and I are going to go check out this restaurant. We're not going to get in, we're not going to join a cult, but I just want to go and see what it's like. Are they going to try to indoctrinate me? Are they going to try to convince me to donate or join? I'm just curious about the whole process. So, and I've also read they have really good reviews on their food too. So yeah, kind of cool. NorCal will provide the jams. That's right. NorCal will be the dude around the campfire playing music every night. 100%. Oh, yeah, exactly. Jason Johnson. Can you, dude, I want to be an apprentice too. Jason Johnson says he just wants to be an apprentice. How nice it would be just to have to work. And that's literally it. Yeah, dude. Oh my gosh, my life. If I could just go to work and like fix things and then come home and not worry about a business or anything like that, that would be so epic. My life would be so much easier and no stresses. You just fix things. So, um, that's funny. Yeah, exactly. All right. So, well, that is it, everybody. It is time to go eat dinner. We are having some sort of an Irish dinner tonight, I think, with some, I think she's making cabbage soup of some sort, which sounds amazing. And I think we've got some Irish soda bread. I've got a nice Guinness right here. So, happy St. Patty's Day to everybody. I'm going to cue up the outro music. And I will definitely be coming in here in a few minutes with the pups to say hi. So stay tuned. Again, thank you so very much. I'm going to cue up the outro music and we will catch you guys on the next one. If you missed anything, feel free to shoot me an email, hvacrvideos@gmail.com.